gentlemen, to MBR, or as we like to call it around here, Nothing But Rants, the show where I find topics that I'm oddly passionate about and I pontificate upon them. These are not hot takes, but rather takes that I'm hot about. The funny thing about a standard is once you set it, you have to find a way to maintain it. Now, we've been on this little kick around here lately of bringing you a lyric, tying it into a take to start this show. That ain't no lyric, but that's an absolute bar from Glenn Schumann. We got to talk to Glenn Schumann and Todd Hartley today, and I always find it fascinating to listen to these men talk football. We obviously don't get a ton of media availability at the University of Georgia. It's designed that way. They want to keep everything kind of in-house and tight, and we get that. I've often said that if I ran a college football program, I would probably run it as tight with the access to media as Kirby Smart does, because you don't really need it. You're a winning football program. You don't need us in there telling your story. You tell your story on Saturdays. Totally get it. So when I have the opportunity to listen to people like Glenn Schumann talk football, well, that's like my juice. That's something that gives me energy in this life because, as you can probably tell by listening to me on this network, I am really, really passionate about the game of football. I'm really passionate about studying the game of football and learning from those that teach it and coach it at the highest level, and Glenn Schumann is certainly in that category. And I'll talk about Hartley in a minute, but there's a unique brilliance about Glenn Schumann. I am very curious to study his brain, his football brain. I want to listen to him talk about the game of football. I want to see the game of football the same way he does, because honestly, if you haven't been paying attention, he's probably one of the more gifted minds in the game of football with regards to defense. Okay, so if there was ever a person that I'd want to study, it would be him. And I got a chance to sit with him in a room today and really observe him one-on-one and find out who he is, what he is, how he is, if you will. And I'll tell you this much right now. He is a no lows, no highs kind of guy. All right, you'll never get a read on him. He's very different in this sense than his predecessor or his boss in Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart walks in the room, I know what his vibe is that day. I'm telling you right now, I can get a read on Kirby Smart the moment he walks in. You got good energy? Are you high energy today? Are you pissed off today, Kirby? Something wrong? Something didn't go right? You want to come with a different attitude today than you did yesterday? There is a very emphatic nature about Kirby Smart. He is a passionate individual. He is an up and down individual. Glenn Schumann is not. That is not what Glenn Schumann is about. In fact, again, he is no highs, no lows individual. The other thing I notice about him, and it is part of that no highs, no lows, he is a processor. Okay, he processes information, he takes it in, and he has an ability to digest information better than most. A prime example of this is oftentimes in a media scrum like that at the University of Georgia, guys will ask multiple questions because they're only going to get the microphone once. So you'll hear a lot of this. Coach, I got a two-part question. First question, yada, yada. Second question, yada, yada. Most of the times, coaches will go and answer question one really, really intently. You know, they'll give a full response, they'll give a full answer, and then they'll say something along the lines of, can you repeat the second question? Or can you give me question two? I've been around Glenn Schumann, and I've watched Glenn Schumann pressers for 3 years now since he's been elevated as the defensive coordinator since Dan Lanning's departure, and I will tell you that I ain't never once heard that, because he just retains all of it. There is a way that his brain processes this, and honestly, it's behooved him as a football coach. He retains a lot of information. He holds a lot of football information in that brain of his. He is 100% a processor. I will also tell you this after listening to Glenn Schumann today, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think he ever leaves the University of Georgia for anything other than the job. The one job that totally consumes him, the one job he can't get out of his head. I don't know what that job is right now, but considering his past, I can tell you what it ought to be. And if I were in Tuscaloosa right now, I would be begging and pleading and making sure that when Nick Saban left my program, Glenn Schumann were to be the one to replace him. I don't know if he'll be the guy after Saban. I don't know that. But I'm telling you right now, again, I would be absolutely begging for him to be that guy when Saban ultimately steps down. But I kept getting hung up on this one quote today after listening to the presser over and over and over and over again. I kept getting hung up on this one quote. Quote, there's been a lot of people that were extremely happy, and then they tried to become happier, and they ended up becoming miserable. That was Glenn Schumann today when talking about how he goes about filtering through the additional opportunities that he's presented every single offseason. And when I listen to that, I hear a man that's very, very happy with touching the lives that he's touching right now and where his feet are planted at currently. Because ultimately, when you listen to Glenn Schumann talk, that's what he's about, guys. He is about football. He loves football. He's very passionate about football. But he's just as passionate about teaching, okay, as he is about football. He's just as happy when the light bulb comes on a player that he's coaching as he is when the clock hits 0 and they win a football game on Saturdays. That's what he's uniquely passionate about. He's passionate about teaching. Okay, he's not passionate about being a great football coach. He's passionate about being a great teacher. And that's what I took from today. Football is just his medium. Football is his medium to teach, folks. Welcome into tonight's show, guys. We got a loaded one for you today. Hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. Make sure you have the channel on alerts. I know content schedule as the season has approached has ramped up on you guys. All right, it's the early August right now. Fall camp's going on. We've been operating like it's friggin' season time, all off season. I've been doing 3 shows a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Well, guess what? We're doing 4 nights a week now, Monday through Thursday, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock every single night here on the channel. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. Make sure you're around. And the best way to make sure you don't miss it is hit alerts over there. I want to give a quick shout out to our homies over at Prize Picks. Use promo code Brooks today. You get a 100% match, deposit match over on Prize Picks, meaning you put $100 in, they'll give you a 100% match. They'll put another $100 in for you. And I already gave you my lock of the week here on the board already. Kirby, what do you got for us? By the way, boys, welcome into today's show.
What's going on?
Glad to have you here. You got a lock for me this week?
So, yeah, I got 3 picks I really like. I like Raheem Sanders over 9.5 touchdowns on the season.
Rock Sanders.
He was probably the second best running back in the SEC last year. He's probably very likely to go over that number.
9.5?
9.5.
Got it.
Next, Marvin Harrison Jr. over 11.5 touchdowns. He's arguably the best receiver, or he is the best receiver in the country, arguably the best player in the country. He had 14 last year. Defenses are going to probably double him a lot more, but he's still going to easily hit that number, I think.
They still got another really preeminent.
Ibuka.
Yeah, Ibuka in the slot. So it's hard to double team guys at Ohio State. Go ahead.
Exactly. Then final pick, I got Michael Penix Jr. He is now at Washington. Was at Indiana for a while, kind of 50-50. Last year at Washington, he had 4,600 passing yards.
Yeah.
The line right now, 3,750.
It's on my lock up there on the big board. I like it too.
Barring something going disastrously wrong or an injury, I think he easily hits that number.
All right, so there it is. Christian Kirby's first lock of the week or of the year. We're going to put this up because this is a season total. This one's going to take a little while. We're going to put this one up by your boys. Christian Kirby on the board. We'll see how that pans out towards the end of the year. Prize Picks today, promo code Brooks, 100% deposit match over there. We got a jam-packed show for you guys tonight. We're going to debut Tuesdays with Terrence. For those of you who don't know the man by the name of Terrence Edwards, well, I don't know. You're probably not a dog fan. You're probably just a random fan that found the YouTube page and watching the local hour, which, welcome in. But anyways, we're going to have Terrence Edwards with us tonight. We're going to talk that Peyton Woodyard flip to Alabama, the news from today, of course, and we will finish up our talks. We're going to let the boys talk with regards to the Glenn Schumann and Todd Hartley pressers today. Thought there were some good nuggets from those guys all around. And, hey, we talked dudes yesterday. We're going to talk some more dudes tonight. Love talking dudes on this here channel. Give you some practice notes from today. Had an opportunity to go take a look at practice. No photos, no videos, of course. It was locked down like Fort Knox over there at the practice field. But nonetheless, we're going to give you our thoughts and observations from today. Took some good notes from you guys. And then we're going to talk a little bit of dogs in the NFL as well this evening. So glad you guys could be here. Again, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button, like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. Peyton Woodyard flipped to Alabama today. Committed to Georgia back in January at the Adidas All-American game. Of course, you guys know, Jonathan, you got to go out there with us this year. The Adidas All-American game for me is a massive evaluation tool. I love to go out there and kind of see, the best of the best play against each other. I'm going to try to go to the Under Armour one this year, but the schedules are really, really tough. You go to Under Armour and you're basically saying bye to your family for all the holidays. So it's really, really hard for me to do that one. But we always go out to San Antonio for the Adidas All-American game, and Peyton Woodyard obviously committed out there. We got an in-person interview with him that day. And I distinctly remember him talking about Fran Brown being kind of the leader of his recruitment, being kind of the guy that handled his recruitment. For those of you who don't know, this is a big safety, man, a really, really big safety. I wouldn't qualify him as a center field safety, not like a Chris Smith. Okay, think much more Richard LeCount. Think a guy that's going to be in the box, not a 4-4 runner, but plays with a physical nature to his game. It is a scheme fit for both Alabama and Georgia. Both teams like to play split safety, meaning they don't like to have two safeties in the back end of the defense very often. They like to roll post snap and put a guy closer to the football, take away things like RPOs and slants and middle of the field breaking routes, things like that. So it's certainly a scheme fit, would have been a scheme fit at the University of Georgia. But here is the intel, if I could give you here on this. There's been kind of rumblings of Peyton maybe flipping or decommitting from the University of Georgia, and for a while now. So it's been kind of going on. And most of the time when these types of rumblings occur, you typically see some type of push, if you will, from Georgia if they don't want it to happen, right? A prime example of this is Bo Hughley last class. Bo Hughley was constantly getting flirted with by Auburn. We heard about Auburn potentially flipping Bo Hughley for constant. And when you hear those things as a reporter, when you start getting those intel, you don't want to immediately rush to your fans and say, hey, so-and-so's about to flip. You kind of want to give the kid, the benefit of the doubt to see out the process. Same thing happened here with Peyton. But normally, if it's like a must-have guy, if it's a class staple, like we got to have this guy, we can't lose him. Georgia doesn't lose those guys in a flip scenario. That's not the case here. Obviously, Alabama flips Peyton Woodyard and ends up landing him. I don't necessarily think the fire alarms were going off in the building today. Okay, I think this is something they expected and something that they were comfortable with. And comfortable with is the wrong term because he's a great football player. But this is something they expected, and they weren't freaking out about this one today from all signs and indications. The other thing I want to talk to you about is, and when you hear me say that, you might say as a Georgia fan, but Brooks, last 2 weeks we had like 3 safety commits or 2 safety commits, and KJ Bolden looked like he was going to land. And now there's none. And you look on the 24/7 composite, and you'll see that DeMello Jones is listed as a safety. That kid's going to play corner when he comes to the University of Georgia. So now you have no safety commits in the 2024 class, and you might be freaking out. You might be hearing that, and you might be freaking out. And we talked about the KJ miss yesterday, and it is unfortunate. Don't get me wrong, but I'm here to tell you there is parity in college football recruiting nowadays more than ever, okay? And I hate blaming it on NIL because I don't think that was the primary reason that KJ Bolden's going to Florida State. I think the primary reason is because he wanted to go to Florida State always, and Florida State has their shit together. That's what we talked about last night. But there is sudden changes in recruiting more than ever. I think Auburn just basically flipped the kid from South Carolina the night before he was supposed to commit. They did the same thing to Joseph Phillips the night before he was supposed to commit. Okay, so there is sudden changes in recruiting right now more than ever, and you need to be expecting those things to happen. Sometimes you're going to lose guys that you think you had. People throwing me the Jalen Hayward thing today. Well, Jalen Hayward decommitted too. What's going on with our safety class, Brooks? Jalen Hayward was never going to play safety at the University of Georgia. He was a star recruit anyways. They were going to put him at the nickel if and when he landed at Georgia. Again, not somebody that they were like, oh, all hell's breaking loose. Jalen Hayward decommitted. We'll see where that one ends up. They might get back involved, but I don't know where that recruitment ends up. But it wasn't going to end up at the University of Georgia playing safety anyway, so don't necessarily freak out about that. And here's the other one I want to add. And I know the guys have some stuff about this as well, but I'm going to read you off some names, 7 names, in fact. David Daniel, Nyland Green, Dalen Everett, Julian Humphrey, Jonel Aguero, Justin Rhett, A.J. Harris. That is 7 defensive backs, okay, that I just rattled off. All 7 of those defensive backs have at least 2 years of eligibility remaining in college football, and all 7 of those defensive backs were top 200 players in those classes, and all 7 of those defensive backs haven't started a single damn football game for the University of Georgia. It's a lot of dudes in that room, okay? And you're going to see, I'm not saying that guys are scared of competition, but it's obvious. Hey, look, Georgia doesn't necessarily need safeties and DBs right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to counter recruit when you have a DB room as stacked as Georgia has right now. Like you said, you lifted off those names. Tyke Smith's another guy. He was an All-American in 2020 at West Virginia.
Yeah.
He hasn't been a starter since 2020. He's obviously had to deal with that injury in 2021. But since then, he's been having to claw his way back up the depth chart. That's so easy to counter recruit where they can say, look at Georgia, all Americans aren't even starting right now. Why would you want to go there and sit on the bench for 3 years?
Yeah.
I mean, too, Peyton Woodyard said it himself. You have Will Muschamp, you have Kirby Smart, and you have Fran Brown. Will Muschamp and Kirby Smart are bona fide dudes, people that are well known in this industry. Fran Brown, when he got to Georgia, then people started knowing about Fran Brown. He started picking up steam and his name there. So the fact that you maybe aren't getting these guys that you wanted, like Peyton Woodyard and KJ Bolden, that's fine because Fran Brown, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart have built that roster up for you to still succeed. Like you said, the fire alarms are not going off in that building right now, and that's perfectly fine.
And look, dude, I think most people watching tonight's show, you probably were alerted to me because I was the one willing to tell you that the JT Daniels stuff might not work, right? Like, I have no bones about telling you when I got red flags, when fire alarms need to be signing off. I'm not sitting here with my head buried in the sand. That's not what I'm telling you as someone who's listening tonight and that's a Georgia fan. But what I'm telling you is this ain't the one to freak out about. You know what I mean? This is not the one to be out here freaking out. If it was worth firing the alarm, I promise you, I would tell you. Do have a loaded show for you guys tonight. We're going to keep rattling on. I know we have our boy Terrence at some point about the 8:30 hour. Did you guys have anything else on the Peyton Woodyard stuff or anything else going on there? Yeah, let's move on from that. So I think it's a good addition for Alabama. I think they need that. And we're in the local hour, so I can say this because in the national hour, I don't want to be this hasty. But anybody notice that Alabama's kind of not taking the seconds from Georgia, but they're kind of taking remnants? Okay, Trezman Marshall is going to start for Alabama this year. Trezman Marshall is going to start at inside linebacker for Alabama this year, and he might have been the four on Alabama or Georgia's depth chart this year, behind Smile Mondon, Xavier Sori, and Jamon Dumas-Johnson. So interesting to see that. Again, not that Woodyard doesn't fall into that category, but the rest of them do. We're going to talk about Alabama in the national show tonight. Interested to see how they develop as the season moves on. We'll get Terrence booked up here in a little bit. But let's jump around here, guys. Let's move on to some other segments. We obviously did get our guy Glenn Schumann today and Todd Hartley today. We got a new segment around here. Okay, we don't do a lot of segments. We don't do a lot of skits, a lot of bits, a lot of stuff like that. But send me to 3, Kirby. People ask all the time, what's up with the sword? Why this man's got a sword? This sword right here. My high school football coach, Kenny Dallas, was obsessed with the Old Testament. Shouts out to the B-Blay. All right, was obsessed with the Old Testament. And for those of you who don't know, the Old Testament is just filled with gaudy, bloody, gory wars. I'm talking about man's war. All right. The story of Gideon is a story about a man. It's the original 300, right? He basically goes and fights off the Egyptians with only 300 men of his own. And he had one of these big swords. So my high school football coach, if you happen to grab a letter all 4 years of your high school career, he gave you a big old sword. So I like to keep the sword on me because Kenny Dallas touched my life. One of the many men in the world of football that impacted my life. And he used to do a thing. He used to give folks 3. All right. And basically what all is, it's your way of connoting and congratulating that individual. So we're going to do a little thing around here. We're going to give them 3. All right. So at any point, at home, if you hear me, hey, give them 3. That's all. Just quick little 3. That's all we want. We want a little give them 3. So we do a little segment, give them 3. All right. I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to give you 3 thoughts on today's press conferences from both Glenn Schumann and our guy, Todd Hartley, starting with our first observation. Being Schumann's note on, Schumann had made a point about telling his football coaches that you need to find out which one of your players' teachers is their favorite. And why? Well, because that teacher, if they happen to have developed a relationship with that player as a student, well, we need to figure out how they connected with that individual. We need to figure out how they reached that individual to get their knowledge and to get their attention, to have their attention is the main thing, to have their attention while we're teaching our concepts. I thought that was very interesting to me because I've listened to college football coaches talk about how their job is very similar to teaching. I've never heard a football coach go as far as to tell their staffers, hey, you need to learn who the kid's favorite teacher is, and then you need to go talk to that teacher and say, hey, how did you reach KJ Bolden? How did you reach Jamon Dumas-Johnson? How did you reach this player that I'm recruiting? Because I'm interested in doing something similar. I also loved, second point here, I also loved listening to Todd Hartley talk about his path to coaching. Okay, for those of you who don't know, the path to coaching typically is very sporadic. It's ping pong, ping pong, ping pong. You're going all over the place from school to school, and your progression is slow, right? But if you listen to the way Todd Hartley talked about it today, the number one thing you heard him say is you heard him say something along the lines of, and when so-and-so coach left for such and such school, he brought me with him. Because Todd Hartley's the type of football coach that didn't come from a historically great playing background. This wasn't a guy that played Division I football, SEC football, got a GA job, and then worked his way through the coaching circuit. No. This is a dude that got an opportunity to be an assistant under Mark Richt, okay, developed such a relationship with Mark Richt and developed relationships with the other coaches on that staff so much that, you know, when the tight ends coach left to be the offensive line coach at West Virginia, he brought Todd Hartley. When Mark Richt went from Georgia to Miami, he took Todd Hartley. When Mark Richt retired and, Todd Hartley had a job opportunity to come up, guess who called him? Kirby Smart. You know why? Because Kirby Smart worked with him 1 year back in 2005. Like these stops along Todd Hartley's path, they only existed because Mans developed relationships with the rest of them, the people around him. So when I listened to Todd Hartley speak today, one of my obvious standout points was, hey, dude has obviously touched those around him so much that every time the next guy got an opportunity, he made sure that he brought a portion of his machine, that being Todd Hartley, with him. Also, my last kind of observation of my give him 3 here. Schumann talking about starting with volume. Okay, I asked him about, hey, how do you install your defenses? How are we going about installing during, the season? How are we going about, giving our information to our players? How do we go about studying new game plans, all that good stuff? How do we go about intaking the information? And he said he starts with volume, meaning the install is vast. He tries to give them as much as he can, tries to overwhelm them. And honestly, that's so counterintuitive to what most coaches think. Most coaches think you get young players in, we got to make sure we're giving them little bits and pieces. We got to make sure they're not overwhelmed. It's the opposite of the way Glenn Schumann in Georgia thinks. And to me, it's part of the why. You guys come on this network all the time. You're searching for answers as to why Georgia's as good as they are, right? How are we? What is the result, or what is the recipe for all this success? And it's all of these things, right? It is Glenn Schumann's ability to take volume and coach it that way, as opposed to coaching it the way others have for years. I think I see Terrence trying to hop in and out of the meeting there. I think he's back there waiting on us. So let's patch Terrence in right now. Oh, first, hold on. Hey, give him 3. All right, let's patch our boy Terrence in right now. Terrence, how we doing, baby?
Man, I'm doing well, Brooks. What's going on?
I'm doing great. Terrence, I went back and checked our direct messages today. I started going to Terrence Edwards workouts in February of 2020. So it's been 3.5 years now since I've been knowing you. And I got to tell the audience here, because I haven't had the opportunity. This is your first, film guy debut, if you will. The joy and the knowledge that I've learned from going and watching you coach the receiver position has been an experience to me that I put along with the highest points of my career as a media journalist, because you coach a position that was very foreign to me. For those who don't know, I obviously didn't play wide receiver. So getting to hear you talk about it and getting to hear you explain things and coach them, man, it's been an integral part of my growth as a football mind. So I wanted to let the audience know that. For those who don't know him, ladies and gentlemen, this is the all-time leading receiver at the University of Georgia. I meant to do this before we added you to the stream. But I don't know if people know you were a 5-time All-Star in the CFL, Terrence. Did you know you were?
Was. Yes, I was. That's why I am in the Winnipeg Blue Bomber Hall of Fame.
Did you get your number retired up there?
No, they don't really do jersey numbers. They just kind of put your jersey aside, but mine haven't been put aside because there's someone currently wearing it now.
The reason I ask is because you may not have your jersey retired there, but did you know no offensive player at the University of Georgia is wearing 8?
No, I didn't realize that. I knew Sherman wore it last year.
Sherman wore it last year. Jonel Aguero is going to wear it on defense this year. And in years past, the only player I remember wearing it is Dominic Blaylock since AJ Green. So
Correct.
guys have kind of stayed away from that 8. I think it's a little special there at the University of Georgia. Hey, man, Georgia's in the middle of fall camp, Terrence, and I texted you last week. I kind of want your, camp story, if you will, and I've got one for you just to let you think about yours. My freshman year, I go to camp. We're involved in camp. Camp's almost over. So last Thursday, we have like our last physical practice. And we take the pads off, and everybody's like, hey, boys, we're going out tonight. We're going to go to the one club in Rome, Georgia. All right, so obviously I'm a freshman. I'm underage. And because, as soon as camp's over, there's like a massive relief moment, right, Terrence, as football players?
Right.
And so we all go out, and I'm underage, so they're marking the X's, right? Big old Sharpie X's on your hands. The next morning, we have Friday morning walkthrough, right? Early, 8 a.m. and the 7 a.m. practice before class. And some of them freshmen, they forgot to mark out that X. They forgot to rub out that X on their hand. And so next thing you know, hey, they're over there rolling. They're over there running because how dare you have the balls to go out the night before the last day of camp. Terrence, you got any camp stories? I'm sure you got some great ones. When camp was really camp, nowadays it's a little soft.
Right. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I was the best student at the University of Georgia, but we could not wait for class to start because then we could only have one practice. We could only have one meeting. And back then, it was straight tour days. It wasn't all these protocols that is put in place now that, especially when the heat index gets to a certain degree, you got to stop. No, it was straight morning practice, meetings, afternoon. So we was happy when school started because that also allows us to not practice that much. And we all knew the game was around the corner. But, man, the tour days that we had compared to what they have today, and rightfully so, I'm not saying that what we did back then was right, but that's what we did because I do believe in the protocols that they have put in place to just help these kids force the heat, but it was dreadful.
Yeah, no, I remember we used to have 3-a-days. I mean, there were times in high school, my freshman year, and then I remember towards the end of my football career, people started to implement these changes because we started having kids fall out, dehydration, and you can call my college football coach used to call it the softening of America. Y'all boys out here getting soft. But no, I definitely remember the 2-a-days. Nowadays, they kind of have 2-a-days, Terrence, but it's like a walkthrough that doesn't count as a practice. And you go out there and you kind of walk through everything, and then you come back in the afternoon and you have your big physical, get after it kind of practice. And I don't know if you've watched Georgia practice, but watching how teams have evolved with regards to how they're practicing the speed and tempo, taking less water breaks, just kind of keeping it more simulated towards actual football. I think the way we've changed how we practice has kind of gone into this as well. I'm sure you've noticed this as a high school football coach. How you've practiced has certainly changed over the years, hasn't it?
Oh, most definitely. Just the tempo. I just think everyone has kind of figured out how fast you practice, and you don't have to practice as long because we say at Milton, we try to get our conditioning in during practice because we're so fast paced. We're running to each drill. And if you've ever been to a Georgia practice, man, those guys are moving. And if you don't know where to go and Kirby sees you not moving to a station fast enough, you're going to get called out over the loudspeaker. So, man, these guys are moving. They're very detailed. So everyone should know what to do and what the next drill is. But, man, you just see those guys constantly moving. It wasn't so fast-paced. It was probably longer and not as fast-paced when we was in high school. But today it's so fast-paced, man. We're out there an hour, 45, hour and 50. But the tempo of the practice seems like we're out there 2.5 hours.
The other thing I've noticed that coaches are starting to do is, like used to, Terrence, when I was playing, we'd have like 12 periods of indie, right? Where you're over there with your individual coach and you're just like working through steps or working through whatever you're installing that week. When I watch Georgia practice, they're never doing the same thing for longer than like 10 or 11 minutes because they don't want to lose the attention span of their players. Like they constantly want to move and they constantly want to think them. They constantly want them adapting. Terrence, I'm curious. Georgia got 2 transfers in this offseason, right? Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett. Now, when you go out to practice, Dominic Lovett is starting with the ones playing in the slot, right? And then you look at Ra Thomas, and he's 3rd, 4th on the depth chart at the X position. And intel that we're receiving right about now, Terrence is telling us that, hey, one guy both guys good enough to play for us, start for us, make an impact. One guy knows the offense, figured it out really, really quickly. The other guy taking a little while, that being Robert Thomas, to kind of figure it out. You've been coaching this position. You played this position. When you've got two football players, they're on two different levels in terms of how they are intaking the information. How do you go about keeping that guy up to speed, and how do you go about teaching them the offense?
Well, he has to get kind of one-on-one sit time with the coach. If things are not clicking as fast, you got to try to figure out, why not? Everyone learns differently. So if he's a visual learner, if he's a person that has to write stuff down 1,000 times just for it to stick into his mind. So you have to figure out how he learns and the best way for him to learn. If things are not progressing as fast as you think it should for the playbook wise. So I know B-Mac, and B-Mac's going to figure out. I know that offense is going to figure out how to get the best out of Ra Thomas. We've seen both of these guys play at their respective schools last year, and talent-wise, both of them have talent to be starters on this team. And I told a player today, I had a player meeting with some of my younger guys, and I just say, I don't care how talented you are. If we as coaches do not trust you, that we know that you're going to be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be, you can't play. So as you see one that's in the first team, and maybe he's picked up offense a little better than Ra, but we can't deny Ra's talent. And hopefully something clicks in him, or B-Mac figure out a way for him to understand and simplify it, but don't dumb it down for him. Just simplify it so he can understand where he needs to be so he can play fast. So you're just trying to figure out it's just like our children. You try to figure out how to parent each child differently because all kids are different.
It's an interesting spot to be in. Like the receiver position, I've always said, like, hey, worst comes to worst, 3rd and 7. Like we can get in 3-by-1, and he's closest to the sideline. We can tell him his route. You know what I mean? Like if we really got to win, and he's our best bet, we can't let and allow his lack of knowledge for the playbook at that moment to inhibit our ability to win. If he can go out there and win his one-on-one, let's tell him what his one-on-one is, and we can kind of get by that way. I understand the need to kind of know where everybody is and be in the right spot at the right time on every down. But if we just need to get him onto the field to get him to win, I felt like they did this with George Pickens a couple years ago as a freshman, Terrence. I felt like it was clear he didn't have a full depth of knowledge of the playbook, but he was so damn good, and he was their best and most physically gifted X, that they just threw him out there and said, hey, not necessarily run what you want, but go figure it out.
There's a certain thing that you can understand that he knows and understands. And there may be small packages that, like, look, you focus on this, and when these plays are called, you're in, and he's comfortable. So there's ways, just like you say, get him close to the sideline, or certain plays that, look, we're going to put you in on these 10 plays. Know these 10 plays in and out. So there's ways to get him on the field.
And in the NFL, where huddling is much more common, you can do these things as simple as tagging plays. You know this, Terrence. We'll just say, hey, X drag, X post, X dig, whatever the route is. You just tag it at the end of the play. Terrence, over the years, man, your 1,000-yard season, right? It's become the new, is this Georgia's year, right? It used to be, is it Georgia's year to win a national title? Is it Georgia's year to win a national title? Now it's, is it Georgia's year to break Terrence Edwards' 1,000-yard season barrier, if you will? I'm curious, who was the guy when you watched him, when you heard about him, when you heard, hey, Georgia just signed receiver X? Who was the guy you were like, oh, for sure, my shit's broke, my shit's shattered?
Oh, George Pickens. Almost definitely. I believe if he would have stayed healthy, he would have had an opportunity to get 1,000 yards. He's just that gifted.
Yeah, no, I always thought it was going to be George too. You think there's any chance that, Bowers has gotten close? He's had an 800-yard season and a close to a 900-yard season, and you kind of can assume George is going to play at least 13, 14, maybe 15 games. Do you think Brock Bowers has got a chance this year, Terrence?
I do think he has an opportunity. If you just look at the Bobo offenses, when he's the offensive coordinator, he's always a majority had 1,000-yard receiver. And I think Brock has the capability. For one, they're going to play the 14 games. I think when I did it, I think I played 12 when I did it. So they're going to get the opportunity to play. The only downside I can see of because we all know the schedule is not as great as it has been in the past. And do he play enough in those first few games to get the stats to get it? That's the only thing I worry about. But if there's been a year, if he stays healthy, I think Brock gets the 1,000 yards this year.
Absolutely. Hey, I always have one rule when I talk to guys that played for Mark Richt. I know you were recruited by Jim Donnan, but you played a couple of years under Mark. I'm always quick to ask guys like you who played for Coach Richt and are very close to the program now under Kirby Smart. What is the primary difference between the two? Because I know the difference in the results, right? The difference in the results is 10-2 versus 12-0, 10-2 versus 11-1, random 7-5 season versus that doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen again at the University of Georgia. From, an insider's perspective, a guy that played for Rick and a guy that's close now, what's the difference, man?
Different coaching styles, personalities are very opposite ends. Coach Rick was more laid back. He still commanded respect. Kirby is definitely more talkative, more in your face, more upbeat. Coach Rick allowed his coaches to coach, not saying that Kirby doesn't, but Kirby is coaching every position. You hear him on that mic, and he's going from beginning of practice to the end of practice. So two totally different styles, and just the recruiting part of it. I think Kirby have done a tremendous job of building depth. I personally believe the motto was let's build a wall around the state. Let's get the state best players. I think Kirby has said, forget that. We're going to build a state around the United States and not just Georgia. So we're more of a brand that we're going out and get California kids, Florida kids. And we did have our sprinkle of outside the state kids, but their philosophy more was let's lock down the state. Let's get the top 10 out of the state. That's where we're going to put our main focus, and we could go outside the state and kind of get the rest of the players. But Kirby is let's go, and we're not going to – no stone is going to be unturned. We're going to find every player. It doesn't matter where they come from. I mean, we went up to Nebraska and tried to get the kid out of Nebraska that played 8-man football because he is so talented. So they're going to find players all over, and they're going to put all the resources to go get the best players in the United States and not just Georgia.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear Kirby talk about, hey, we're not worried about geographic location. We're worried about scheme fit, and we're worried about finding the best player. Terrence, are y'all a Thursday night scrimmage or a Friday night scrimmage this week?
Thursday night scrimmage against Gainesville, 7:30.
Gainesville. Whoo, Gainesville.
Right, yep.
A good little football game on Thursday night. Hey, I appreciate you for being here, Terrence. We'll talk to you next Tuesday, okay?
All right. Appreciate it.
See you, brother. That's a good dude right there, man. A good dude. And a guy that like I said to start the show when we introduced him, man, I learned so much from him about the wide receiver position because it's not something that I am comfortable with. It's not something that I know that well. So if it's something that I don't know, by God, I want to go learn about it. And when it comes to football, there's very few at the wide receiver position that you need to learn more from. Okay, so Terrence Edwards, he'll be back here next Tuesday. A little Tuesday with Terrence, boys. How'd y'all like that debut?
I liked it, man. It's always good to talk to TE.
I love the way that he talked to. I mean, I figured it was going to be George Pickens, but there's been so many good ones. Like I'm kind of shocked he didn't say AJ Green.
Yeah,
I'm really shocked he didn't say that one.
Man, I might have slipped his mind, but no, George. I thought George was going to do it. Hell, I was the dipshit that had the tweet last year or 2 years ago that Jermaine Burton and George Pickens might have a chance to go over 1,000 yards because I thought they might do it. Like I thought going into that 2021 season or 2020 season before COVID hit, like they got a chance to have some really, really threatening dudes at the wide receiver position. Always great to talk ball with Terrence. Make sure you're hitting that like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff here on the channel. We do have another hour and 15 minutes coming up tonight. We're going to talk a little NBR, a little national football starting at 9 o'clock, but we got some stuff to finish up here. Guys, we got to give them 3. One more time. What you got for me on the give them 3?
All right, so my give me 3. I start off kind of lighthearted because this is one of the things I noticed about when Glenn Schumann was talking. If I were to bet, he can cook his ass off.
You think so?
Because I've noticed this thing. A lot of people compare football to life in certain ways. Only people who know how to cook compare it to being in a kitchen having all these ingredients.
I'm going to keep it 100 with you. I don't think there's a single college football coach in this world that's got time to cook his own meals.
Nah,
Not a damn one.
He probably didn't have time to, but
You know what sources tell me the number one meal is at the University of Georgia coaching staff's office?
What?
Longhorns, Uber Eats. Just ribeyes, baby. Just steak and taters up in the coach's office.
Is ribeye allusion to a later Tonight Show?
Maybe. We might have a ribeye appearance later.
All right, my next takeaway is Brock Bowers might be the perfect football player. And listening to Todd Hartley talk about, if you watch that presser, he probably went on there was like a 10-minute period where he was answering questions just about Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
And one quote stuck out to me. He said, I just try to find ways to not mess him up.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of coach says that to where it's like, this player is so good, it's my job to not make him any worse. Like, it's not even to excel his game even further. It's just, I just don't want to mess him up. Obviously, he said it in a joking way, but still, that's a major takeaway when a coach talks that highly about a player.
I've met Todd on the recruiting trail. I've had an opportunity to talk to him. I've seen him outside of Georgia football. This was my first kind of season to get to listen to him talk, listen to him address a room. I always wondered whether or not he's going to be a head coach. I don't know if he's going to take the coordinator route. I know he sat next to Monken last year, but listening to him speak today, and going to be a head coach someday, don't know when it's going to be. He commands a room like someone who wants to be a head coach. He answers questions. He had an opening statement like he was a head coach. He had jokes. He was clearly prepared and excited to be in front of cameras today, and that's something only a head coach does. You got one more, right?
You literally just took my number 3. It's Glenn Schumann is ready to be a head coach.
Yeah.
He might not be one anytime soon. He might not want to be, but he is more than ready. I think that's how Kirby Smart was. I think Kirby Smart could have taken over a program in 2013, 2014, just kind of waited for that perfect job. But I think Glenn Schumann is in a very similar position right now.
Christian Kirby, let's give him 3. Yeah, dude, you're talking about Schumann, bro. I think he's going to be a head coach at some point. But I also think Schumann is far more self-aware than most college football coaches. Most college football coaches in his position would have jumped at the first opportunity to be a head coach. They would have just ran with it, right? Jeremy Pruitt did this at Alabama. As soon as he got a head coaching opportunity at Tennessee, maybe it was the right one, maybe it was the wrong one, jumped right at it, right? You could say Kirby did this, but Kirby didn't do this. Kirby waited 8, 9, almost 10 years at Alabama for the job, right? His alma mater to open up. I think a very same thing happens with Glenn Schumann because of that quote we talked about earlier, right? He talked about there are people who are extremely happy. They try to strive for even more happy, and then they wind up miserable. What do you got for me, Joe?
First one for Glenn Schumann. Someone asked him about players playing multiple positions, training them at those positions. And he talked about, of course, how it's versatile for their defense to be able to do that. It helps them manipulate matchups on the defensive side of the football. But he also talked about how it helps the players' longevity at the next level. Specifically talked about Natrez Patrick, how he played inside linebacker at Georgia, but he's played a lot of outside linebacker at the NFL level, and he's stayed in the league. He's stuck around in teams. He may have bounced around a little bit, but it's helped him stick around and continue his career there. Todd Hartley, as soon as I started watching his video, he was enthusiastic. The charisma was there. It's just a guy that I completely understand why guys love playing for him so much, because I felt it as soon as he walked in the room and as soon as he started talking. He's like, hey, how's everybody doing? He's smiling. He loves to be there, and I could tell that from that. And then also the second thing, you talked about how he said he didn't want to mess up Brock Bowers. I took away from that conversation, he said he's helped him become a better coach because he's got to find new ways to tap into him and help reach him. You think it might be the opposite with a player like Brock, where it makes your job easier. You ain't got to do anything really. You just got to let him be. But he said it's helped him grow and continue to grow. So I thought that was really interesting.
Jay Will, let's give him 3. Watched Todd today during Indies for a little bit. I went over there and checked out the tight ends. And he's a lot like the great coaches. He sees what he's supposed to see. He doesn't see everything. He sees what he's supposed to see. Prime example, they got 5 pads, right? 5 down linemen, 5 pads on the slit where they're working hand positioning. They're working firing your hips, bringing your hips and throwing your hands, working extension, working blocking essentially for tight ends. And there were 5 guys up. The first 3, there was Drew Sheehan, the walk-on tight end. There was Oscar Delp, there was Brock Bowers, there was Pierce Spurlin, and then there was another walk-on. And Todd Hartley looks down, notices that he's got 2 walk-ons, and notices that his scholarship tight end freshman, Pierce Spurlin, ain't up there. And you know what he does? Pardon my language, kids, earmuffs. He turns around and says, hey, get your fucking ass in there. You know what I mean? Like, get in there, take a rep. We're not waiting around for other people. We're trying to get you better today, son. Like right there on the spot. Again, doesn't see everything, sees the right thing. That's what great football coaches do. Hey, give them 3. Love it. I love me some Coach Dallas too. Let's talk dudes before we send you out of here. We got about 5, 6, 7 minutes left on tonight's broadcast. It's been a good one. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button, like, subscribe, rate, review. Tell your friends. Tell your friends what we got going on over here. Let's blow this thing up. Trying to make this the biggest college football YouTube network show that there is that's not affiliated with some massive brand, because Lord knows we ain't one of them. But no, we got some great stuff for you guys. Let's talk some dudes. I love talking dudes. I love talking big dudes, small dudes, little dudes, fast dudes. I love talking dudes.
You're going to make that your intro every time.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Just dude talking. I pull dudes and I talk dudes. That's what I do. How about us being the Blue Man Crew tonight?
I think we rock it well. I think that's definitely in all of our color palette.
It was not planned either.
No.
No.
Like, I remember I showed up and you came downstairs. You're like, well, I guess we're wearing blue tonight. We won't tell Jay.
We won't tell Jay.
And then Jay Will walks in with a blue shirt.
Yeah.
Like, well,
We're just a group in unison.
It just be happening. It just be happening. We talk dudes and we wear blue around here. Let's talk some more dudes. Well, I talk dudes. Y'all wear blue.
I'm fine with that.
Quarterback rotation was the same today. Carson Beck took all the 1s reps. Brock Vandegrift took all the 2s reps. Gunnar Stockton took all the 3s reps. The intel that I've gotten is kind of very similar to what it was this spring. There's nothing but good news coming out on Gunnar Stockton. Every single time I talk to somebody about quarterbacks, they're like, hey, the Gunnar Stockton guy's kind of figuring it out, man. He might be good. How professional of me to have flatulence right here in the middle of the segment. But nonetheless, it sounds like Gunnar is making some drastic improvements. We'll give you a brief injury report from today. Kamari Lassiter, Tiernan Ingram Dawkins, Smile Mondon, Dan Jackson, and Kendall Milton are on what I would call the temporary injured list. Okay, they were over there with the athletic training staff getting a little extra running in today. Robert Thomas was over there as well. You might have seen his name on injury report list. I think that's extra conditioning, if I'm being quite honest, because he returned to practice while we were there. He was running extra during Indy and then had to come back down during routes on air and run routes on air, and they threw him the ball. So whatever's going on, he wasn't in a non-contact jersey on a full pad day. So whatever's going on with Robert Thomas, to me, looks like conditioning worthy or conditioning based, not necessarily injury based, because you don't return to practice. Those other guys didn't. Some other things. I thought there were I think they're going to be more multiple and diverse in the back end than ever before. This is a lot of information that I've gathered. It's also some sourced information of people that I've talked to. You guys know the schedule. We talked about it yesterday. Ball State, UAB, and Tennessee Martin, 3 of the first 4 games. You don't need answers right now at the defensive back room. What you need is a variety, right? Coach Schumann today talked about building volume. That's exactly what you need to build right now, not only in your repertoire, meaning what you can run, but who's running it. You need to be building a very, very diverse group back there in that defensive back room, because you have that. I think that's what they're going to do, right? Guys like Justin Rhett, I think, are going to play this year. He's a true freshman that, wasn't really highly touted. I mean, he's highly ranked, but wasn't highly touted. I mean, not a lot of people talking about Justin Rhett last year. Looks like he's at least in the 2 deep, at least going to get an opportunity to run and play some time this year. Jonah Aguero, same thing. That dude's going to play a lot this year. And the other thing, I might ask, the haters, not the haters, the ops probably watching tonight, so they might steal my question. I'm probably going to ask Will Muschamp on Thursday when we get a chance to talk to him, how you go about designing defenses for guys who are uniquely talented and differently talented, right? Like Jonah Aguero's skill set is totally different than Tyke Smith. You can't run the same defenses with both of them. You might be able to play a unique or a unified defense, meaning if you took a Venn diagram and drew their circles, they might intercede for a little bit, but they're 2 unique and differently talented players. So you're going to have to run different defenses. I think George is going to do that in the back end. You could say the same thing at corner, right? You got guys like Nyland Green and Julian Humphrey who are very I'm trying to make a big play. And then you got Dalen Everett, who is very much so I'm trying to make the right play over and over again. 2 very different skill sets. I think you're going to get 2 different types of defense when both of those guys rather are on the field. Other observation from practice today before we send you out for the evening. Folks, we have a new nickname, Seaside, for Pierce Sperlin. For those of you who don't know, Pierce Sperlin spent his last 3 years of high school football down at North Walton in 30A down there in, Northwest Florida, down by the beach. And for those of you who also don't know, Pierce Sperlin has probably been receiving a very one-on-one style of shit talk from Kirby Smart for majority of his life as a recruit, because Kirby Smart and Pierce Sperlin's dad actually were friends in college. So it's more of like your uncle shit talking you at the barbecue than it is your coach shit talking you at practice, even though both are happening at the same time. They have a very long history of a relationship between these two. So hearing Kirby give him a nickname, like that's just him showing love in a very Kirby Smart, unique way. Boys, we got anything else before we head out for tonight?
I mean, I'm good.
You're good? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
All right. Hey, we will see you over at 9 o'clock on MBR for Nothing But Rants, our national show. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you hit that thumbs up button, and we hope to see you in about 5 minutes. We'll see you.